Hey everybody, I'm Alex Brooker. Welcome to this week's episode of the Travel Tech Podcast. Now today I spoke to Amit Ganjoo, the CEO and founder of ANRA Technologies. Now Amit has been involved in the UTM, that's the drone and unified traffic management market industry for a decade and has been deeply involved in setting the standards, working with regulators and making things happen in general across the industry. I had great fun talking to him in this conversation and I hope you enjoy this episode, sponsored by Airside Labs. That's airsidelabs.com. Don't forget to subscribe and like this episode. So, Amit, hey, thanks so much for joining me on the Travel Tech Podcast. This is awesome. Great to see you.
Likewise, Alex. It's always a pleasure. Can never say no to you.
I was just before we signed on, I was thinking about when we first met, and it was I can't remember the exact year, maybe 2019, the start of the Future Flight Challenge work
2018,
in the UK.
I think it was 2018.
2018, and in Milton Keynes, and I just remember thinking, wow, who is this guy? He's such a big character. He knows everything about drones and UTM and the problems and what's going on. And you left an impression. You made an impression.
Well, I just use buzzwords so people don't know the buzzwords. They think you're smart. If you throw enough buzzwords out there, people just think you're smart.
Well, you're very modest. I know you are very smart, but yeah, that's you certainly left an impression with me. But yeah, so I mean, what should we start to talk about? Business, innovation, UTM, startups. What do you think?
Your call. We can go anywhere from anywhere. No particular preference. We can talk about weather if you want. I'm
in the UK, so let's not talk about weather. Maybe let's start in doing my little bit of background research beyond what I'd learned from you over the years anyway. I wanted to perhaps touch on like the maker mindset, and I think you built an aircraft by hand back in the day. Is that right? Or is that a hallucination from my AI research?
No. I did build an experimental aircraft. I scratch built an aircraft. This was, I started it in 2011, and I finished it in 2014. Yeah, so I did build, it was an all-metal low-wing aerobatic aircraft that I built. A lot of people buy kits and stuff, but I'm a glutton for punishment and I wanted to try something different and make modifications and stuff. So I got some blueprints and then I fabricated each and every part. And it took me almost 3.5-4 years. And I actually did repurpose an old 1969 Corvair 6-cylinder air-cooled engine and repurposed and used that as a power plant for the engine aircraft as well.
That's so cool. And the reason I asked and brought it up was lots of other people in aviation and travel tech seem to have this maker, builder background, understanding things from first principles. I wondered how does that transfer across to business? Have you found that to be useful, that approach, or is it completely separate for you?
I think it's related. It's like if I look at my career arc, how I've come along. I was always a hands-on guy. I was a hands-on engineer. So, and with my time at previous startups at Ericsson, working with Department of Defense, what I realized is the mindset was always complex systems fail, but they fail at the seams, not at the center. So you have to find those edge cases and where those things are happening. And my career arc has always been about systems that people rely on but don't see, like from aircraft design to airspace infrastructure, something that's happening behind the scenes, making these complex systems work together, if that makes sense.
So failing at the seams, that means we're happy on the happy path, but when we start to find the edge cases or something has gone wrong, one thing has gone wrong, is that what you mean by failing at the seams?
It means like it's the edge cases, like when complex systems, there are so many touch points, so many interfaces and stuff. And happy paths are people always test and load test and build on. It's always those nuances, those edge cases, which normally you don't think about, which get you in the field, which is why if you look at testing a system in the lab versus testing it in the real world, you always find those edge cases. And that's been the true in my career as well. I've realized whether it's building an experimental aircraft or building an airspace management system, it's those edge cases that get you all the time.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, in particular aviation. But perhaps you mentioned Ericsson and telecoms, which is, I don't know, how similar was that? Because I mean, you were a senior leader, engineering leader, executive in Ericsson in the telecoms industry before perhaps coming back to aviation with ANRA Technologies. Could you perhaps expand on that decision or that part of your life and the difference between these two markets?
Actually, there are a lot more similarities than differences, because in the telecom market, when I was working there, if you and I used to use this analogy in my talks previously. So if you go back, say 20 years, and you picked up a cell phone in London and you went to US or somewhere in Asia Pacific, your cell phone all of a sudden stopped working because there were these fragmented systems and technologies, GSM, CDMA, PDA, in different parts of the world, and there was no interoperability. So you have these, it just worked in the local area. And there were different standardization bodies, 3GPP2, 3GPP, and eventually a common standard came up. 3GPP1, GSM became the underlying standard, and come today, moving from GSM 4G, 5G, LTE, and now moving forward to 6G and beyond. It doesn't matter where I buy a phone, my phone works everywhere, because now we have the common standard, interoperability and stuff. And what I learned in the telecom days, building these black box solutions that are not interoperable is not a scalable thing. And telecom kind of went through the same cycle as we are going through in the aviation world, with these new entrants and stuff, and people trying to build black box solutions to address all the problem statements and requirements without thinking about the broader picture. This will end up in a lot of fragmentation, which means just like in the telecom world, when people eventually had to forklift whole networks to migrate to GSM, LTE, and other stuff, a lot of the carriers had to invest billions of dollars to forklift their infrastructure. To avoid that, the going in principle in this new paradigm, airspace management, UTM, space, should be interoperability, building interoperable systems, which is why we, and me personally, spent a lot of time, which we don't get compensated or paid for, is in working on the standardization and the harmonization and building standards that are interoperable and not a black box where if you sell someone a black box solution and you have to make a single line of code change, and you pay millions of dollars, versus building an interoperable published standards which anyone can build and builds a competitive marketplace as well. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does make a lot of sense. And I'm very aware of the huge amount of work that you personally have put in to those standards organizations on the UTM side, and working on how the different parts of that system, aviation system, can actually link together. So on the business side, how are things with ANRA? I've seen a lot on LinkedIn recently, some sort of big announcements, and I'd be really interested in what's the latest with ANRA Technologies and how far you've got.
So we've come a long way. We just completed 10 years this past October. So I think it's been a long journey. We are what we call an overnight startup success to 10 years, if you call that overnight. So it's been a marathon, but I always say it's innovation, experimentation, and operationalization, especially in a regulated world like ours, regulated space like ours. So in the small US segment, the last 18 months have been operationalization. So we've moved past that innovation, experimentation.
Okay.
And that is proven by the sheer fact that we are seeing commercial operations scale go from a few hundred to few thousand operations on a daily basis in just one small area. And that's happening today. We are seeing that happen in North America with the Shared Airspace initiative, where multiple commercial operators are doing, whether it's drone deliveries, inspection, other BVLOS operations. So US is scaling up. In Europe, we have the use-based regulation, and as ANRA, this is public knowledge, we are the first use-based service provider certified by EASA. And in US, we were the first non-vertically integrated provider that got the near-term approval, or LOA, from FAA to offer strategic conflict detection services, or UTM services, for BVLOS operations. So these are now commercial operators, whether it's Amazons of the world, whether it's DoorDashes of the world, whether it's New York Power Authorities of the world, that are using the system to scale operations. For example, I can talk about New York Power Authority as an example. So they manage hundreds of drone flights each and every single day from a centralized operation center using our technology. Okay. Amazon uses our stuff, DoorDash, Mana Drone Delivery, Matternet, and a lot of others use our technology as well. So we are seeing that scale happening here. And then in Europe, we are seeing things starting to bubble up, because right now what's holding things up in Europe is the airspace risk assessment, so people can officially designate use spaces and start scaling up. But we are seeing a lot of uptake on the pre-use space, where enterprises actually have a need, so where we can provide our solutions, and once the airspace assessment is complete, they can start just transition without having to forklift or make changes. So we are seeing a lot of pull now versus push as an enterprise. Okay. On the commercial side. And then also, I would say on the enterprise side, then also our customer base is also the air navigation service providers. So we work with the ANSP, such as the Dubai Air Navigation Services, DANS in UAE. They after a competitive bid, they selected our system for Dubai-wide rollout of use-based UTM system, it's a fairly complex system, because it's not just your commercial users, it's defense, military, security, everyone integrated into the same system, and not just small drones, even including advanced air mobility in the same mix as well. Because as you know, that market part of the world is probably going to be one of the early adopters for advanced air mobility as well.
Oh yeah, that's something I definitely wanted to ask you about, because I think from your perspective, you've seen that research and innovation proceed at a different speed, or different pace of innovation across the different parts of the world, the different regulators. And as I understand it, you have customers across multiple different continents. So I would be interested to understand from you what's been the unlock for the more rapid deployment to move to that production phase and really get flying and get going in terms of commercialization.
I think it has been two things. I use the term coalition of the willing. Like people, it's in the early days, even competitors have to work together to help the industry grow, and eventually we'll compete. But it's the coalition of the willing. That's what has spurred the US shared airspace, where a bunch of competitors came together and say, for us to scale, we all have to work together in the same airspace. Let's make this happen. And the second key part was the willingness of the regulator. Say, yes, I am going to work with you, instead of imposing highly onerous regulations and heavy burden which is hard to meet, I'll work with you in a spiral iterative process. Let's start with something simple, try that, then add more complexity, add more services. So like we started with strategic conflict detection services, and now we're going to look at network remote identification, conformance monitoring, and other services. Keep adding. So working in that iterative process. And once you get flying, you get a lot of data, because at the end of the day, the regulator, from a policy point of view, wants to get real world data that helps real world policies as well. So that has been the key reason for the ramp up and unlocking of the market and actual businesses growing, because otherwise, in essence, it's hurting the industry and the businesses.
So
does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It really does. A sort of iterative approach and getting some runs on the board with a step together with the regulator, and then adding more use cases and more complexity. So in terms of those different UAS use cases, there are the very small drones. There's drone delivery. We've got middle mile logistics, and then there's urban air mobility. Across all of those different use cases, where do you see that sort of most rapid path to commercialization and more routine? Companies can make money and things become much more normal.
That's a great question, and I can give you my perspective. It's not necessarily the right and the only perspective, because it will depend a lot on the geography as well, and the areas and the needs and the business requirements of area. So some regions, it might be, it's not necessarily one size fits all. In some areas, it might be drone delivery market that is going to lead. In other cases, it may be security and public safety side of things, with what's happening geopolitically as well across the world. But at a high level, we are seeing basically BVLOS operations that are the key business drivers, whether it's critical infrastructure inspection, surveillance, or drone deliveries. Those are the areas where we are seeing, and security, those are the areas we are seeing the uptake.
And so BVLOS for our listeners is beyond visual line of sight. And it's one of the earliest unlocks that's needed to be able to pilot the drone out of visual range, which was one of the sort of key early regulations that was sort of controlling what people could do, and sort of all of the standards that have been worked on the last few years have been heading towards how to operate beyond visual line of sight safely. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, because that's where the real, I shouldn't say that's the only use case, but that's where scale happens. Because there are only so many use cases that are visual line of sight. I can do a rooftop inspection, I can do a wedding photography, but those are not scalable use. They're scale, but not the level of scale you would have in long range commercial UAV operations.
And so in terms of actually achieving certification for your systems and products, that I'm aware, I've been working in this aviation industry for quite a long time, as have you. It's a big deal. It's hard to get certification. That's a real achievement. So would you mind sort of explaining, how does that work? If you have a product, or if you're creating a new startup, you've got a great idea, where would you even start? How does that process happen?
What I'll tell you, it has to be an intentional decision to get certified, because especially in a regulated industry like aviation, certification means everything, because you won't fly in an aircraft that wasn't certified, like type certification, what they call in the aircraft world, right? Boeing or an Airbus, unless it was type certified. So in the aviation industry, similarly for the software pieces, whether it's an air traffic management system or a UTM system or a Airspace system, it needs to be certified as well. So we had to make a conscious decision, because we said, okay, we should put our money where our mouth is, because we said, yeah, we can build a software, our software works and stuff, but does it meet the safety standards, not just from a software point of view, your software assurance, your safety support assessment, your security, your coding standards, your policies, corporate, all those things. And for that, we underwent EASA certification. The first certification, and EASA was learning as we went along, and it took us 2 years, 5 days to get certified. Many millions of euros and tens of thousands of man hours that went into it, because EASA looked at everything, right from the point where we captured a business requirement, map it to the regulation, to how it traces all the way to a single line of code, and how we test and deploy and manage it on a daily basis. So it was, I would say, a very tough and stringent process, and more than what we expected. But at the tail end of it, when we came out at the other end, and I mentioned this publicly to EASA as well, we came out as a better organization. We didn't think that going in, but it made us question things we were doing. And we were already doing a lot of things, but setting the processes in place, the controls in place, and making sure what's coming out at the other end meets the rigor and the level of safety and security that's necessary in this industry.
And is there enough, or how is the collaboration between the different regulators across the world? How does it work where you've achieved EASA certification, and then you go to the FAA or go to other countries with their regulators and say, okay, how does it work in terms of then going to a new region or a new place?
So eventually, we hope there'll be reciprocity, just like it's for aircraft and certifications by EASA or FAA. Currently, for example, we are EASA certified and we are deployed in UAE. UAE has its own regulator and certification, but just because we were EASA certified and they follow EASA regulations to a long distance. So it was a very positive thing for us that they had the confidence level that this system is already at a level of maturity that none of the other systems are there. So it was very important from that point of view. Eventually, like if we talk about two regulators, FAA and EASA in this case, eventually we do see FAA, at least when we got our EASA certification, but we had to follow a separate process in US called the near-term approval process, through which we got our approval to offer BVLOS and UTM services. The reason there was no direct reciprocity, because US did not have a regulation, a published regulation. You need a published regulation to map it for reciprocity point of view. So once the new Part 108, 146 becomes a rule, then it's even on one of the roadmap items in the regulation and in the NPR, in the public comment period. That was one of the things. Once that is in place, then there will be reciprocity. Then the regulators can work with each other on reciprocity. EASA has the framework, US is working on the framework. Once the frameworks are there, then you can do that translation. And eventually, the goal for enterprises like companies like ours or vendors is we don't want to have to go through certification in every market. Once we do it, there should be a level of recognition. Yes, this means this level of safety of standard, so I'll accept it and have those MOUs or whatever the agreements are between the regulators.
So just
in a sense, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and just like your mobile phone works in every country, so the parallels with the standards and recognition just unlock the sort of frictionless use of systems and products that are shown to be safe and reliable in multiple countries.
I agree. And I don't think it's the regulation that's the enemy, it's ambiguity, because what happens is sometimes it's very ambiguous what the regulation means and what the implementation and the interpretation of the regulation is. And one of the things that has helped us is because we've been working very closely with the different regulatory bodies here in different parts of the world. And And we can see a lot of regulators collaborating as well already. So the US Shared Airspace Initiative that's in US, and I happen to be the co-chair for the operations committee. It started in US, and we had regulators from all around the world that came and saw it. And then UKCA said, hey, can we replicate this in UK to see how this would work in the UK context? So currently we are running a project for UKCA under the Airspace Modernization Program, and we are replicating the same concept one-on-one in UK with local UK operators and different use cases. And the objective is to see what works and what are the gaps, so we can, from a policy point of view, help CA fill in those gaps and continue towards the same transition towards from experimentation to operationalization. So we see a lot of that happening. We see a lot of positive trends globally where regulators are saying, oh yeah, this is happening. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look at it and evolve it. Obviously, there are different geographical differences and stuff like that, but there are a lot more similarities than dissimilarities.
So the goal being of those activities, reducing the ambiguity. But how do you actually reduce that ambiguity? Is it through flying and trials and capturing data, or is it working together closely in terms of desk research workshops and those kinds of things, or both?
It's probably a combination. And for us, a lot of it was because we have been doing this for like a decade. So we had already proven that the technology works.
Right.
The challenge was always, how does it line up with regulation? What is the interpretation? If the line in the regulation says this, how do you interpret it? Because sometimes there's different interpretations of what the term means and what that means. So that was a learning experience for us and the regulator in many cases. So we'd be working closely with the regulator, like especially as part of the certification process. We had to make sure we had the right interpretation of the regulation. And hopefully it was hardest for us because we went in first, but now it'll be easier because we asked the regulator a lot of the questions, like they asked us a lot of questions, because a regulator was not used to certifying a cloud-based system. They had always certified a black box system. Yep. So now all of them, they're certifying a cloud-based system. What are the differences? So it was us educating them, then them learning, and them educating us on their expectations on what they want the system to, what standards, what each clause in the regulation means, and how do you comply with that, whether it's means of compliance, whether it's direct compliance, whether it's additional guidance material that you have to work with. So that has been, and working on I personally also sit on some rulemaking committees, whether it's with the EASA or with FAA and stuff like that. So that has also helped educate. And I think everyone is trying to do the right thing, and the more engagement you have with the regulator, I think the better it gets. What we have noticed is most regulators are very willing and want this to succeed. And regulators are not necessarily the bad actors, but you have to find the middle ground, come meet in the middle and say, okay, how do we make this work? And once you have that mindset, and going back to my original point, what made the differences was the willingness from the regulator side to say, okay, let's figure out how we will make this work versus telling you why you cannot do this. So that's going back to the coalition of the willing.
So it's a mental, psychological, cultural shift as well, like a commitment to collaborate, genuinely collaborate together and show flexibility. I suppose on both sides, did you have to revise the system and change things from your side as well, or was it more, I don't want to say educating because that's maybe not the right verb, but collaborating in one direction?
No, so it wasn't so much changing our technology or the platform, because I think from a technical point of view, we had most of the thing. It was more on the process thing, how the process was meeting the requirements in the regulation. It's refining our process and how, as an organization, transitioning from a pure a technology company to an aviation company. That was the main mindset change. I shouldn't say mindset change. Process, refining the process. I would I wouldn't even say defining the process. It was refined because we had the processes. We had simple examples that we spent almost 2 months figuring it out because the terms we were using versus the terms EASA was using were different. And they were asking something, and we were saying, we don't have that. And then 2 months down the line, they came and did an audit. They said, you already have it. We've been asking for it for 2 months. I said, we didn't know this is what you meant because the terms were different. The terms used were being different. So simple examples like that.
Okay, that is fascinating. So coming on to the human, I want to ask you about AI because AI is everywhere and everyone's working on it, talking about it constantly. So I will ask you about AI. But before I do, I want to ask you about how much those human relationships have played a part. From my experience, customers wanted to get to know me in the business I was working in, because if they make a decision to buy something, they want to feel like, okay, Alex is going to deliver. And you mentioned you were sitting on some rulemaking committees. I know you've been involved extensively over the years in the standards development as well. Could you talk about your experience from that human level of interacting and the value or how those relationships have developed with the humans in the regulators and the standards bodies?
That's a great question. And I'll give, again, a disclaimer, my perspective. Like you earn the trust. So I personally, I don't go in with a sales mindset like I'm trying to sell. I'm an engineer by nature, and I'm a problem solver by nature, right? So my goal is, let me understand what the problem is, and can we come up with the solution? If at the end of the day, the solution is a win-win, that's a win for everyone. So that's the mindset I go in with. And I think that has helped. And it hasn't happened overnight. Like I told you, we are not an overnight success. So we've been doing this for a long time. And we've been part of pretty much every single research project, every single trial that has been run over the last 10 years, whether it's in North America or in Europe or other parts of the world. So we've invested a lot of time, effort, goodwill, resources in making this. And I think working behind closed doors in meetings, workshops, and hashing things out, figuring out, oh, this doesn't work, we have to redo this and stuff, that has given not just me as a company, like that trust and confidence that regulator has. Like, how do I explain that? Maybe this is another way to use it. Like, you cannot come at this. This is not a software problem to solve. This is an aviation problem to solve. So you have to look at it from an aviation point of view. And when you go and talk to the regulators, you have to understand aviation. You can't say this software, I can track this dot on the map and I've solved your problem. You have to understand, why is it important to track that dot on this screen? And what happens when you see the dot? And if dot does X, Y, Z, what happens? So you have to understand that concept. And that only comes with understanding the domain and the knowledge. And once you talk to the regulator with that level of knowledge, the trust automatically happens, versus a pure, hey, I have this software, this solves your problem, without understanding what the underlying reason is for that. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And with that in mind, let's talk about AI. And I'm trying to formulate the question in my mind. How do I ask this question around AI? Maybe if we carry on with the theme of human trust, if people can use AI agents and Claude Code and Codex and these tools to create wonderful things, and let's assume they test it as well, it's not just vibe coded, but if things can be generated and created 10 times or 100 times quicker, what happens to that human relationship part? Does it go away, or does it become more important, do you think?
I don't think it goes away at all. And going back to my original point, writing software is just one part of the solution. understanding what the software is doing and why it is doing is a different part. So the whole test strategy and making sure it lines up with what the actual objective is. Because you can tell AI to write this, 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 and this, and it'll write beautiful test cases for you too. But there has to be. So the way I say it, eventually we may get to a point where AI writes perfect code and it meets everything when we have enough prompting engines and stuff that do it very well.
Yeah.
But in the near term, I think AI, most people expect AI magic, but the reality is it needs to be a deterministic system. You need governance rules and you need human accountability. Especially in aviation, you're looking at AI in its current state can be in advisory capacity, but I don't think we are quite there for it to be in safety critical. So you need some level of human, maybe not in the loop, human on the loop in the near to midterm. And once we have had enough cycles and stuff, we will probably get to a point where it's less and less human intervention, but human is definitely involved in the near to midterm.
Yeah, I totally agree on the safety critical side and deterministic, non-deterministic things. I personally, I think there'll be new architectures. We have to wait for the new architectures and perhaps something beyond large language models for the kinds of challenges that we could tackle in aviation. But with the current state of AI, what's your view on where the innovation or where it can be applied? Where do you think the sort of rich use cases are that AI could tackle and move things forward?
So there are a lot of advisory capabilities where you can use AI to make the life of an air traffic controller easier, or the operator, drone operator easier, like where instead of them having to sift through 10 pages of information, they get that condensed summary, right, of what this means, and helps them make decisions quicker. So it's facilitating the decision-making process, not taking over the decision-making process. So that's where I see in the near term.
And so that's where, so the humans involved in the decision, they're making the decision, but AI is helping them cope, helping that human cope with.
So your response time is faster. Instead of you taking 2 hours to make a decision, you can probably make a decision in 2 minutes or 10 minutes.
Right. No, I get it. I get it, and I agree. And so, what's your view? What's the future of ANRA? Have you got some things coming up that you're able to share now, or events that your team will be present so people can come and find you and meet you?
Sure. So from an AI point of view, AI is one of the most abused words out there. Like you don't see. I'm yet to go to a conference where I see a briefing and AI is not mentioned at least 10 times in the briefing. So we've been using AI in our systems in one shape or form in advisory capacity for many years. So it is inherent part of the backend advisory services. So we continue to evolve that, and there will be some new features, new capabilities over the next few months and years. We continue to introduce out there, and I think we'll see a little more push towards advanced air mobility and some new services coming along. And that's still further down the line, but there's going to be a little more experimentation happening on that. So you'll probably see something more coming from us on that side, and more on the operationalization on the small US side. In terms of the events where we will be, in a few weeks, we are going to be at the European Drone Forum and the Exponential in Dusseldorf in Germany. So please come, ping me or ping anyone from the team. Our team will be there. We are going to be at Amsterdam Drone Week coming up here. Then we are going to be at Exponential in US. And I'm sure there are a bunch of other events, but those are the ones that come to my mind. And always, you don't have to wait for an event. You can always ping me on LinkedIn or just any one of our team members, and I'm sure they'll be happy to chat.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. That's fantastic. And all of the details will be in the detail section underneath the video for people to reach out to Amit and the team. It's been fantastic talking to you, Amit, and I learn from you every time we have a conversation, and that trend has remained in place. It's still going.
You're too kind.
Still going.
You're too kind. But no, it's a pleasure talking to you, Alex, as always.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amit.
Thank you, sir.